There is not much information about Bryce Laspisa's childhood, but it is generally believed that it was not marked by any troubling incidents. As the only child in the family, he was surrounded by love and affection. Bryce was born on April 30th, 1994, to Karen and Michael Laspisa. In 2012, he graduated from high school in Naperville, Illinois. In 2013, the Laspisa family moved to Laguna Niguel, California, while Bryce lived about 500 miles away from his parents because he was preparing to begin his sophomore year at Sierra College. According to everyone who knew him, life seemed to be going well for Bryce. He had performed excellently during his freshman year and had a girlfriend, a blonde young woman named Kim Sly, whom he clearly adored. August 26, 2013, also appeared to be a completely ordinary day for the young student. That day, he spoke with his mother, who later recalled that he seemed happy, and their conversation was as normal as ever. The strange aspects of this case begin on August 27th. The events of that day were, at the very least, ambiguous, shocking, and difficult to believe. Even nearly 7 years later, no one had been able to determine what happened to Bryce, a young man who had seemed happy and content with his life just 24 hours earlier. On August 27th, the day after Bryce began his next semester, his girlfriend, Kim Sly, probably the person who knew him best at the time, noticed a strange change in his behavior that worried her. It is not entirely clear what Bryce did to unsettle her so much, but he admitted to taking a pill meant for treating attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, that had not been prescribed to him. Bryce's roommate, Sean Dixon, said that Bryce had taken the drug in order to stay awake all night and play video games. On top of that, he had been drinking alcohol throughout the day. Friends of Bryce mentioned that it had become a habit for him to drink a bottle of hard liquor every weekend. That same day, Bryce's behavior became even stranger when he gave away some of his most valuable belongings to friends, including a pair of diamond earrings that had belonged to his mother. By the afternoon of August 28th, the people who knew Bryce were becoming extremely concerned about his behavior. Sean called Bryce's mother to share his worries, and there were many. He told Karen that his roommate had been acting very strangely and that he had broken up with Kim the previous night, sending her a message saying that she would be better off without him. According to Sean, Bryce admitted that something was bothering him, but he never explained what it was. A couple of hours later, Bryce called his mother himself. Despite having broken up with Kim the night before, he had driven 90 miles to her home in Chico. Bryce assured Kim that he was fine, but she took the phone and called Karen. She told Bryce's mother that he was acting completely out of character and that she did not think he should be driving. Karen suggested visiting Bryce the following day, August 29th. He told her that he really wanted to talk to her, but convinced her not to come. Once again, he did not explain what he wanted to discuss. After Karen finished speaking with her son, Kim took the phone again. Karen instructed her to give Bryce his car keys back, but only if he promised to call her the next morning. At 1 a.m. on August 29th, the phone rang at the Laspisa family home. Karen missed the call and quickly forgot about it, assuming that her son had returned to his apartment and had called just to let her know he had gotten home safely. Later, phone records would show that Bryce had actually called his parents while he was in a remote desert area, roughly an hour's drive from his apartment in Rocklin, California. Around 11 a.m. on August 30th, Karen and Michael Laspisa received a voicemail from Bryce informing them that he had used their roadside assistance program at 9 a.m. after running out of fuel west of Bakersfield, California. This meant he had traveled approximately 350 miles. A gas station attendant named Christian delivered 3 gallons of fuel to Bryce while he waited in his car. Bryce paid $20 for the fuel using his parents' credit card. At that time, Bryce was in Buttonwillow, and judging by the town's location and its distance from Chico, Karen and Michael assumed their son was heading toward them. If he had continued in that direction, he would have reached his parents' home in less than 3 hours. Several hours later, Bryce still had not arrived, and his parents began pacing in anxiety. In desperation, they called the gas station and asked Christian to return to the spot where he had delivered fuel to Bryce to check on him. Christian agreed to help, but when he returned, he found Bryce still sitting in his car in the same spot. When Christian asked Bryce what he was doing, he simply replied, "Nothing." Christian informed Karen that Bryce appeared to be fine, although his eyes were noticeably red. Karen finally spoke with her son around 12:30 p.m. The parents expected him to arrive home around 3 p.m., but as time passed, he still did not show up. For the next 6 hours, Bryce inexplicably ignored all calls from his parents. When Karen and Michael tracked their son's phone, they discovered that he had traveled only 8 miles in the entire 9 hours. It was unclear why he had not answered any calls during this time. By 9 p.m., the family was terrified. Unsure what else to do, they contacted the California Highway Patrol. Officers found Bryce in his car on Lagoon Drive, still in Buttonwillow. The police searched his vehicle for drugs but found nothing. They stayed with him for 20 minutes and conducted a standard field sobriety test, which he passed. Bryce, who was 19 years old at the time, was legally an adult. Since he was neither intoxicated nor in possession of drugs, the police had little authority beyond advising him to call his mother and continue home. Bryce resisted calling her, so the officers dialed the number themselves, forcing him to speak with his mother around 10 p.m. She asked what he was doing, and Bryce oddly replied that he was planning to hang out with friends later. At 11 p.m., Bryce stopped at a gas station in Buttonwillow and purchased a drink. He told his mother he was on the interstate but offered no further details. At some point that night, Bryce stopped at another gas station and refueled for $39. During the night, Bryce again used his parents' roadside assistance program and was once more located in Buttonwillow. He remained in that area for approximately 13 hours without explanation. This time, GPS monitoring staff tracked Bryce to an intersection to ensure he was traveling safely and in the correct direction. According to his GPS, he was expected to arrive at his parents' home by 3:25 a.m. On August 31st at 1:50 a.m., Bryce called his mother again to say that he had exited Interstate 5 but had returned to it. At 2:08 a.m., Karen spoke with her son for the last time. He called to say he had exited the interstate again and planned to spend the night in his car. By that point, Bryce had been awake for nearly 48 hours, so Karen did not argue with his decision to get some sleep. Bryce, however, did not slow down to sleep. He continued driving for another 90 minutes to Lake Castaic. At 8 a.m. on August 31st, a California Highway Patrol officer knocked on the Laspisa family's door. The news he brought was not good. The officer asked Karen and Michael whether they owned a beige 2003 Toyota Highlander. When the couple confirmed that it was their vehicle, the officer informed them that at 5:30 a.m., the car had been found abandoned near Lake Castaic. It had gone off the road just 2 hours from the Laspisa family home. The vehicle had rolled over and was found lying on its side. The rear window of the car had been shattered, the officer said, but Bryce was nowhere to be found. Police believed he had been inside the vehicle at the time of the crash and had managed to escape by breaking the rear window. A small amount of blood was found on the passenger headrest and the back seat, but not enough for investigators to conclude that Bryce had been seriously injured. Inside the car were Bryce's laptop, mobile phone, and wallet. A duffel bag was found in the back seat, leading investigators to suggest that he may have taken something from it when he broke the rear window and fled the scene of the crash. Surveillance footage showed that Bryce made 3 trips to the area where the vehicle was later discovered between the time he left Buttonwillow and 3 a.m. One camera captured the Toyota Highlander driving along a road near Lake Castaic at 2:15 a.m., just minutes after he last spoke with his mother. The same camera later recorded it again traveling up the road at 4:29 a.m. Tire tracks were found at the top of an embankment leading down toward the shore of Lake Castaic. Based on the tread marks, police concluded that Bryce had driven off the embankment at a relatively high speed without attempting to brake. Investigators drew the seemingly obvious conclusion that Bryce may have driven into the lake in an attempt to end his own life. Search operations were immediately launched in the area where Bryce's car had been found. Lake Castaic was searched for several weeks by divers, but the efforts were unsuccessful. A nearby campground was also checked, but no trace of the student was found. Midway through the search, Los Angeles firefighters were called to a fire that had broken out in the area surrounding the lake. To everyone's alarm, the source of the fire was a burning body. Fortunately for the Laspisa family, it was not Bryce. As it turned out, the victim was 35-year-old Lamondre Dion Miles. The man from Los Angeles had been shot multiple times during a dispute, after it became clear that he was unable to repay a debt. After the killing, his body was dumped and set on fire, despite evidence suggesting possible intentional actions by Bryce to either harm himself or stage his own disappearance. Karen and Michael Laspisa, along with investigators, also considered whether their son might have witnessed something he should not have seen, resulting in his death. Friends, relatives, and volunteers distributed flyers and searched remote trails for Bryce, while police used helicopters to scan the area from above. On the 9th day of the search, investigators brought in search dogs, which successfully tracked Bryce's scent from the car to a road that crossed a dam and led to a truck stop. Unfortunately, no further leads were discovered. With no new evidence and no sign of the 19-year-old, the search was officially called off after 3 weeks, although volunteers continued looking independently and police kept patrolling the area. At the same time, investigators interviewed those closest to Bryce to understand his state of mind in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. They learned that, in addition to giving his mother's diamond earrings away, he had also given away his Xbox. They also discovered that on the same night he left, Bryce had sent his roommate Sean a message saying, "I love you, man, seriously. You're the best person I've ever met, and you saved my soul." People who are considering suicide often give away their belongings and leave emotional messages for loved ones, but Sean insisted that he did not feel Bryce intended to die or never return. He told investigators that, in his opinion, Bryce simply needed time alone and would likely come back soon, but Bryce never returned. And 7 years later, no one knows what happened to Bryce Laspisa. Months after Bryce's disappearance, Karen and Michael hired private investigator Denise Savastano, who kindly offered to work pro bono. Denise, who specializes in missing persons cases, believes that Bryce intended to return home to his parents. Her theory is based on Bryce's GPS coordinates. Denise thinks that the young man's drug use could have triggered a psychotic break, which might explain his irrational behavior. At the same time, she acknowledges that Bryce could have sustained a head injury during the crash, leaving him disoriented and causing him to wander off. Alternatively, Bryce might have experienced a double blow. He could have been in a state of psychotic distress before the accident, and then sustained a head injury, likely a concussion during the crash, which would have worsened his mental state. Denise and Bryce's family also hired an echolocation specialist to search the depths of Government Cove near the lake, operating under the assumption that if Bryce had taken his own life, this would have been the place. After 2 days of searching, it became clear that the cove was not the young man's final resting place. Karen and Michael continued to maintain that they did not believe their son would have left voluntarily, and even if he had, he would not have stayed hidden for more than 6 years. Eventually, he would have reached out to someone. It is important to note that everyone who spoke to Bryce on the phone in his final days said he seemed okay. His family also does not believe the suicide theory. Yet, given the very limited evidence, it appears to be the most logically consistent explanation. Consider the following points. Bryce told his parents that he needed to discuss something important but never said what it was. He gave away several personal valuables, which could indicate suicidal thoughts, but could also suggest he was planning to start a new life with new belongings. In the hours leading up to his disappearance, Bryce wandered around Buttonwillow and spent a long time sitting in his car with no apparent reason. This could suggest several things. He may have been contemplating what he wanted to do: go home, end his life, or run away. Alternatively, he could have been waiting for a car that never arrived. Was someone supposed to pick him up to start a new life? Did he spend so much time in Buttonwillow simply waiting for a drug dealer? When California Highway Patrol officers searched his car, they found no drugs, and none were found after the crash. It seems he deliberately drove into the crash but was able to break the rear window and escape. Search dogs traced Bryce's scent to a truck stop, making it plausible that he may have hitched a ride with a truck driver. Additionally, in the fall of 2013, months after Bryce's mysterious disappearance, there were frequent reports of sightings of him in Oregon, though police were unable to confirm any of these leads. The theory that he died by suicide is supported by many of the same pieces of evidence that also suggest he left voluntarily. Mental health conditions often first emerge during adolescence and early adulthood, and alcohol and drugs could have acted as a trigger that brought underlying issues to the surface. His mobile phone and wallet were found inside the car. If he had died by suicide, he would have had no use for them anymore. If he had instead chosen to start a new life, he may have left them behind in order to avoid being tracked. Bryce's family is convinced that he may have been harmed by criminals. There are two possible scenarios here. First, Bryce may have encountered the killer of Lamondre Miles and lost his life simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It is difficult to believe such an extraordinary coincidence that a violent murder occurred at the same time Bryce was driving around the Lake Castaic area. But in life, stranger things have happened. Second, it is possible that the student accepted a ride from a dishonest truck driver. At some point, he may have asked to be dropped off and continued hitchhiking toward his intended destination, only to be killed. In fact, the detail that Bryce ended up near a truck stop opens the possibility that his body could be anywhere across the United States. However, if a truck driver did give him a ride, it is unclear why that person has never come forward to report it to the police. It must be acknowledged that Karen and Michael's actions also do not always appear logical. If Bryce's girlfriend felt he was acting strangely and should not be driving, why did Karen instruct her to return his car keys? Why did Karen or Michael not go to pick up their son themselves, especially after learning that he had only driven a few miles over many hours and had spent most of the day sitting in his car? Perhaps the young man knew he was struggling with a serious drug problem and wanted to talk to his parents about it. At 19, every problem can feel like the end of the world. He may have felt that running away or even ending his life was easier than confessing to his parents. Maybe Bryce wanted to drop out of college and leave or take a different path in life, but knew his parents would not approve. One can only hope that Bryce is somewhere out there, living his life, happy and no longer using drugs. And if he is alive, perhaps one day he will make contact. He was the only child of Karen and Michael, with a loving girlfriend and a large circle of friends who desperately tried to find him.